Hi everyone, welcome to Confirmation. Our next week, this part of Confirmation is about our faith as a way of life, not just a system of belief. This is the part of Confirmation we talk about not just what Christians believe in, but what they do, and the way of being that marks us as a faithful people, living out the mission God has called us to. And this week we're going to talk about prayer and care. In some ways, care is very similar to service and hospitality we talked about last week, but in some ways different, more elemental. But let's start with prayer. And I'll start here. If you ask me to define exactly what praying is, I'm not sure I can define it. It is many different things for different people. For some people, it is a conversation with God. For some people, it is something like centering or meditation, a quiet space in which they listen. It is many different things, as I said, but let's start with these two. You may have grown up with praying, and you may have even heard us praying in worship in a way that sounds like we're doing a lot of asking for things. Or even just telling God things that God should already know. God, you are wonderful. We trust you. We are scared of this. We want this. We need this. We are here for you. Sometimes we can pray that way, and it seems strange because we don't immediately hear anything back. Some of us have a lot of noise in our own heads all the time. Others of us, maybe not. But even so, listening for the voice of God can be pretty frustrating if we're thinking about this as a back and forth. So let me start here. When we ask God for things, or we express ourselves and tell God things that are true about our lives, or things that we think are true about God, we do that not because we think God doesn't know, but because it's about being honest with ourselves. I've said before that I don't necessarily think that prayer changes God, but I know that prayer changes us. So for me, when I pray, it is about allowing things to come to the surface, to be noticed and named for what they are. And when I say honesty, I don't just mean bad things. This idea that we need to only come before God and confess everything about us that we find imperfect. But it's about honest about where we really are. And in that way, it really is like a trusting, loving relationship. Because it is a trusting, loving relationship. Someone to whom you can go and be absolutely honest. And there, in your full self. In prayer, sometimes I recognize God in ways that I wouldn't have thought about before. In some ways, I recognize what I'm dealing with more when I say it out loud. And I can't just shove it away and ignore it, but I have to express it. It forces me sometimes to be more honest with myself about what I'm really experiencing than I otherwise would. Knowing that God knows it already, God knows us better than we know ourselves, and loves us more than we can imagine. And so, when in prayer, I can get to that true center of myself, I often find God there waiting for me in feelings of peace and unburdening and gratitude and courage, which is the Spirit of God. And so in that way also, when people meditate or breathe through yoga or any number of different things that people do to calm their mind and connect with the truth and find joy and beauty I see this as all connected. And in the same way, when we connect with our true selves, we are also connecting with God. We will find God in us. We connect with the Spirit of God, the divine spark in us. You may know that at the close of some yoga, if you've ever done yoga at home or in gym class, what are some of the words that they say at the very end? They'll say, Namaste, which is a way of saying, as I understand it translated, the light in me sees and honors the light in you. I believe that it is about connecting with our inner world. And prayer is about orienting ourselves then beyond ourselves. It's recognizing the things that we can't do. God, I need this, I want this, I am afraid of this. And these are things I cannot control. And honestly, that bothers me. Honestly, that's hard for me. But I'm going to offer to you everything that I don't want to carry around anymore. And why would I carry it around anymore? I can't do anything about it anyway. Yes, sometimes a conversation with God can feel one-sided. But that's because the God of the universe, the Spirit all around and through creation, with whom we are in relationship, with whom we're having this conversation, doesn't speak to us most of the time like a human being. Although sometimes some of us have found prayers answered, or we have found in our awakening, in our awareness, we have seen and heard things happen that seem like an answer to prayer. Speaking of the light in us and the light in others, you may know that, and maybe you remember from several weeks ago when we were talking about Jesus and we had different names for Jesus, different things that Jesus was called. One of them was the light of the world. And if you've watched worship lately, you know that that's what we're doing in worship this season, Epiphany, celebrating Christ as the light of the world. You know, that began on Christmas Eve when we lit the Christ candle. But what's amazing is it's not just that Christ was called the light of the world, but Christ called us the light of the world. He said, "You are the light of the world." And he said, no one, after lighting a lantern, puts it under a bushel basket. Remember singing, "This little light of mine," sometimes? "This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, hide it under a bushel." No, that comes from the Bible, that comes from Jesus saying, you were made to be the light of the world. God's light is shining through you, so don't hide it. One of the best things we can do to share that light and shine that light is to care. Caring can be very hard work, but it's something we all need. We all need care. Sometimes I wonder if we think that we've got to be perfect before we offer care to anybody else. But we don't. When we offer care, it is out of the love of God that has found a home in us, that wants to share that light and that love with someone else, because we see in that person also a beloved child of God with the light of the Spirit in them. Some people, I have found, it is very easy to care for. Jesus would tell us, I'm paraphrasing, but Jesus would go on to say, it is very easy to love those who love you. And that's good, but just about everybody does that. Specifically, Christians are called to love also their enemies and care for them. And by love and care for, I don't mean that you have to feel warm and fuzzy about them or even like them. But we're still called to care for them in acts of service, to treat them with justice, and to respect them as fellow children of God. Instead of just loving those who love us and hating those who hate us, that's how a lot of the world works, and that's how cycles of violence and vengeance just continue. Those are, in some ways, the easiest things to do. The harder thing sometimes is to really care. Now, one more thing about care. Sometimes we can hear the message that we are to care all the time. We care for others the way God cares for us, we say, and in a way that sounds limitless. But we're not expected to be limitless, and we're not expected to be perfect. Jesus wasn't limitless. He was limited as a human being. He didn't have limitless, endless care and energy. After caring and healing and teaching, that would take it out of him. And he would need to take time also to care for himself. He would rest and restore and renew and pray and reconnect. And when he was filled back up, he then gave some of that energy, some of that light away to those who needed it. So remember that. Care, because that's what we're called to do. Christians are meant to be a caring people, but remember, that doesn't mean that you need to be limitless or perfect. No one is. So care as you care for the world, and care for those things you love, and even try to care for those people you're scared of and that you don't like and that have hurt you. Remember also to take care of yourself. Send me a couple of thoughts this week about what your experience with prayer has been like, or what you've heard in this video, and what your experience with caring has been like. Do you find it easy to care? Do you find it easy to care for some people and not others? How do you care for yourself when you're feeling empty and alone? Well, I'd love to hear what you have to say. In the meantime, thanks for being there. Have a great week. Hang in there, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.